Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
This is KRWG Public Media, TV, radio, online, news that matters. Now, across the Mesilla Valley and the borderland, the stories that shape our community. From the KRWG Broadcast Center at New Mexico State University, this is Newsmakers.
Thanks for joining us for Newsmakers. I'm Casey Counts. Author M. John Fayhee joins the program to talk about his new book, A Long Tangent, Musings by an Old Man and His Young Dog Hiking Every Day for a Year. Fayhee and his dog Casey hiked in the Gila near home, and they help us explore our relationship to nature, growing older, and dogs. Later in the program, we'll meet an El Paso author who grew up in Nazi Germany and has a self-published series of books. First, John Fayhee, welcome to KRWG Public Media.
Thank you so much for having me.
Why don't you tell us first a little bit about your background as a hiker?
Well, I started hiking, walking through the woods as a tyke. I spent my first 12 years in the northern Adirondack Mountains in New York State, and I was pretty much a free-range child before the term was codified. I had but one rule in our house, and that is I had to be home for dinner by 6 o'clock. We moved south for when I was in high school, and I was a Boy Scout, and I didn't like it there. It was hot, it was humid, there were mosquitoes, there was poison ivy. So in 1976, I uprooted and moved to a place called Southwest New Mexico. And lo and behold, on the northern horizon was the Gila National Forest. And I moved out here on a tennis scholarship. And I didn't stick with it very long because I really took up backpacking in the Gila. So that was in 1976, almost 50 years ago. And I've been an avid hiker since. I've done the Appalachian Trail, I've done the Colorado Trail, I've done the Arizona Trail, I've done the Colorado section of the Continental Divide Trail. I just got back from Iceland where I hiked the Lagavegir Trail. I hike a lot. This is in my DNA.
And this is actually your 13th book, so tell us a little bit about your background as an author.
I started actually writing in the second grade. I never started reading until I was about 20, but I was a writer from a very early age. I wrote for the high school newspaper, I edited the college newspaper at WNMU in Silver City, where we live. And I started working for the El Paso Times as a stringer in Silver City while I was still in college at WNMU. And that went on to be a full-time gig. And when Gannett launched USA Today, I got laid off. And I emigrated to Colorado as an economic refugee and started working for various papers in Colorado. And given my background in the outdoors, I approached Backpacker magazine in 1986. Would you please publish a story for me? Groveling, and they did. I was shocked. And that really got my foot in the door with outdoor writing, and I've been an outdoor writer pretty much ever since. I owned and edited a publication called the Mountain Gazette, which is pretty famous in the Mountain Time Zone. I did that for 12 years, and all the time I was writing books.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about the inspiration for this particular book?
I was sitting on a bar stool in downtown Silver City lamenting the fact that I was getting ready to turn 60. I was feeling sorry for myself. I'm a baby boomer, and baby boomers were never supposed to get old, and yet here I was sitting on a bar stool lamenting my age. And I decided I wanted to do something of relative note, something physical, but something attainable. I didn't want to embark upon a process that I would fail at. That would really bum me out. The previous year I'd hiked 41 straight days in a futile effort to lose a few pounds before my high school reunion. And I played off that and decided to hike 100 straight days. And then on the way home, after having a few adult beverages, I decided only a wuss would set such a small goal, 100 straight days. I said I'm going to hike every day for a year. And the next day I got up and I started it. And I ended up hiking 367 straight days, with the only rules being every hike had to be at least an hour. Most of them were longer than that. And every hike had to take place out in the forest. And walking around town did not count. So hiking boots, backpack, that kind of thing. So anyway, I pulled it off.
Let's talk about taking your dog Casey with you.
Casey was, she was 5 at the time, 5 at the beginning, 6 when it ended. And she was my hiking companion already. So it wasn't like I had to have a long heart-to-heart with my dog saying, do you want to join me on this? She was going to join me on this. So she hiked with me almost every day of those 367 days, with the exception of about a third of the way through she went blind. I let her out for a potty break, let her back in, and she walked into a wall. Something had happened and we never figured out what it was. Rushed her to Tucson to a canine ophthalmologist who diagnosed something of 29 syllables, gave her a couple of injections directly into the eyeballs, which I was not allowed to watch. And the ophthalmologist said she would probably be back to normal in 2 weeks, and she was. I was already thinking, I'm going to have to deal with having a blind dog for the rest of my life. But she recovered fully, and she was a trail dog from the get-go. Our relationship started off kind of in a bumpy fashion. We really didn't like each other for the first 6 months or so. And
what would you say it was about you that she didn't necessarily take to?
Well, I'm not sure that I'm that likable of a person. So she had a mind of her own, and she didn't like the fact that I imposed certain rules on my pets, and they're pretty basic. They're not allowed to chase wildlife. They're not allowed to run up to other people on the trail. They have to have basic manners. And it took her a while to understand that if she adhered to those few rules, she could pretty much define her own life out in the woods. Our relationships solidified via hiking together. That's where we really bonded. And by the time, the end of the story, by the time that we finally had to put Casey down, she died of cancer, we were inseparable. She almost worshipped me, although she still had a mind of her own till the bitter end.
Were there any other days that she just said, Dad, I just want to sleep in today?
She has had issues when it was really hot. So there were definitely times we had to, and I have issues with hot too. I don't handle really hot temperatures very well. So there were days that we had to throttle back because it was just hot. She would look at me like, you know, it's 95 degrees, we are not supposed to be out in the woods. So I would have to pay very close attention to that, because dogs, they can't sweat, so they can overheat very easily.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about some of the content in the book in terms of just the sparks of inspiration that happen while you're out in the woods that you come back and write about.
I have always been a daydreamer when I hike. I let my mind wander. It's actually where I do most of my writing. I'm literally not writing in a notebook when I'm walking along, but it's when I'm thinking about writing. And I do, when I return home, immediately go to my laptop or go to a notebook and jot down whatever it was I was thinking about. This endeavor gave me the opportunity to put in written fashion a lot of things that I had long wanted to write about but didn't have a venue to do it. Backpacker magazine wasn't appropriate, or the books that I had done previously were not appropriate. So I was able to get a lot of stuff into this book that I just didn't have an opportunity to write about previously. It also gave me the opportunity to take strolls down memory lane, where anything that occurred to me on a given day was fair game for inclusion in this book. I have a chapter on hiking sticks, for instance. A gentleman pulled in at a trailhead as I was getting ready to leave, asked me some directions, and as he was pulling away said, "Nice hiking stick." And I was like, what a compliment, that was so nice. And it inspired me to write a very long chapter about my history with hiking sticks, which goes back to my youth. I've always used a hiking stick. And the Gila, unlike some more developed places, people still use hiking sticks. And we run into each other on the trail and we talk about our hiking sticks. Where we live in Silver City, the Continental Divide Trail goes down a road right near our house. I have often picked up Divide Trail hikers on their way back out to the trailhead. And everyone that I've ever given a ride to has given me a trail name. None have said my name is Bill or my name is Steve. It's always Windwalker or Aspenfoot or something like that. And when I hiked the Appalachian Trail, I had what's called the trail handle. So that inspired me to write a chapter about trail handles and sort of self-redefinition. And this book is not about putting one foot after the other. I hike some more tomorrow.
Are you willing to share the handle that you used?
I'm willing to share the first half of it. I'll share the whole thing. My trail handle was Jumpin' Jack, the hallucinogenic hiker. And I'll let your imagination wander as how I got the second half of that.
Well, it certainly is a magical time for the Gila Wilderness, turning 100.
It is it's going to be a big to-do next year. There's talk about celebrities flying in and the Forest Service is organizing the event, and I think a lot of it's still in the air. There's been talk about the president coming out. We'll see that. The president came out to Colorado when Camp Hale was designated as a national monument last year, so he has a history of doing that. The Gila was the world's first legally designated wilderness area in 1924, and it was the baby of Aldo Leopold, who I'm sure your viewers have heard of. And my concern is it's going to be drawing significant attention to the Gila. And Silver City is already becoming a known destination for outdoor recreationists. And those of us who live there, we want it for ourselves. So we don't want other people coming there, but of course there's going to be a lot of attention drawn to it. There'll be a lot of Subaru Outbacks there.
Well, there are obviously some mixed interests there, right? So
Sure.
you have the interests that are served economically in terms of building up our outdoor tourism industry. But as you point out, there is damage that comes along with that.
Yeah, and that's a controversial topic, and if you bring it up, as I did in this book on several occasions, you are automatically labeled an old curmudgeon, or you're accused of wanting to close the gate behind you. And that is a dialogue in the outdoor recreation community that I don't think we have enough. I think we should be having that dialogue a little bit more often about the impact that increased visitation has on our natural areas. There was just a story that I read about the increased visitation in the Oregon Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument here in Las Cruces since it was designated a national monument. And apparently the visitation has increased dramatically. And of course the economic interests in Las Cruces are saying, yay, that's exactly what we wanted. I'm not sure that the wildlife in the national monument agrees with that. There may be no impact at all, but there probably is. And when you increase visitation, when you build new trails, when you upgrade trails, there's a lot of research now on the negative effect that has on the environment. And as outdoor recreationists, of which I am one, we don't examine that as much as we should. I'm starting to see a little bit of dialogue in the outdoor press about that, but nobody wants to say, I'm bad, I should not go hiking, because we all want to go hiking. So it's a controversial subject that I think we need to be talking about a little bit more, but if you do bring it up, you're an old curmudgeon. I admit it, I'm an old curmudgeon.
Well, you mentioned wildlife. With the last few minutes that we have, tell us some of your more interesting maybe encounters with wildlife, or some precarious circumstances you found yourselves in, you and Casey, or you alone along the way?
Well, I early on in this year-long process, I was jumping across a creek, not a big creek, a small creek, and I was midair when I heard the sound that none of us wants to hear in southwest New Mexico. And in the shadow of a rock was a rattlesnake rattling. And my trajectory was taking me straight to the rattlesnake. And I don't know how I didn't land on it, flapping my arms or contorting or whatever, but I missed it. It reared up, it didn't strike. And I've seen a million rattlesnakes in the wild, but I twisted my ankle when I did that. And my wife and I had an instance going into the Gila where we were going on a backpacking trip. I'd bought some Subway sub sandwiches for lunch on the first day, and I looked up the arroyo that we were sitting next to, and I said, that's interesting. And a bear was coming down the arroyo. And my wife handed me her roast beef sandwich. And I thought, that's tacky. She's sacrificing her husband. And I stood up and I ran and I threw the roast beef sandwiches as far as I could. And my wife looked at me and said, why did you do that? And I said, well, I thought I was saving our lives. And she'd been handing me a roast beef sandwich because she wanted to take a picture of the bear. And she didn't want to get ketchup and stuff on her camera. So I've had to scamper up a tree because a bear took out after me in the Black Range in the Gila National Forest. I've seen mountain lions, I've seen bears, rattlesnakes, javelinas. That's pretty much our bobcats. I've seen quite a bit. Haven't been killed yet.
We're glad for that.
Yes.
I was just going to ask who runs faster, you or Gay?
Yeah, well, yeah, we're all
But
slow
of course,
runners.
you're not supposed to run.
No,
right?
no.
Listen, with the last few moments we have, John, I'd like for you to hold up your book and tell our viewers where they can find a copy.
Well, this book is available on Amazon.com, and we actually, for about a half a day, got some sort of rating, you know, best-selling book in some arcane category or something, and it is. I'm assuming it's at Barnes and Nobles in Las Cruces, and it's definitely. It only came out in September, so we're still getting it out, and it's published by Members Press of Western New Mexico University, New Mexico's newest university press. Started a little over a year ago, and this is their first big project they have done.
And you're going to keep hiking, I assume?
I was out this morning before I drove to Las Cruces.
I'm John Fayhee, author of A Long Tangent, Musings of an Old Man and His Dog Hiking in the Woods Every Day for a Year. Thank you so much for spending this time with us.
I appreciate it. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Now, senior TV producer Andrea Vasquez brings us the story of El Paso author Wally Meyer-Check, who recalls her upbringing in Nazi Germany during World War II and her life later as an American. Her love for her adopted country is embedded throughout her self-published book series.
When you drive through an El Paso neighborhood, one house stands out more than the rest. You think to yourself, this person might be a little patriotic. The reason is, the individual who lives in this house has witnessed parts of the darkest events of world history.
November 1938, when we got up in the morning and went to school, we was dismissed because there were riots and burning and looting of the Jewish store. We did not know what it was all about.
Wally Meyer-Check was born in Augsburg, Germany in 1929. She witnessed Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass, in her hometown. Kristallnacht was a 2-day Nazi-coordinated assault against Jews in Germany and Austria, in which hundreds of synagogues were set on fire. Thousands of Jewish businesses were destroyed, and hundreds of Jewish families were attacked and beaten. 30,000 Jewish men were deported to concentration camps. Many say this marked a turning point in the beginning of the Holocaust.
And a few days later, the Jewish people had to wear the yellow star with a big black J on it. And this is when we knew that something was not right. But since my mama was poor, never had a radio, I was not educated in politics. And we had to swear our oath to Hitler to be loyal to him for the rest of our life. We had no choice. We was told, we was sworn in, and then a few weeks later, he appeared in our hometown. And I saw him across the street at the balcony, and we were all cheering. To us, Hitler was hope, because this is the way they put it. We treated him like he was a little god with respect. This is unbelievable what propaganda can do and brainwash you, even as a child. And to get rid of that brainwashing takes time and proof that what they said at the propaganda is out of question. And this is when I saw for the first time a huge train with lots of people in there. We had no idea what was going on, and they were going to Dachau, That we found out later, but not at that time.
Dachau, Factory of Horrors. Dachau, near München, one of the oldest of the Nazi prison camps. It is known that from 1941 to 1944, up to 30,000 people were entombed here at one time.
Everything was a secret, and how they've done it to this day, I'm wondering, you know, because it was unbelievable. And to tell you the truth, we did not know what was happening to the Jews.
Wally, separated from her mother and brother, was forced to be a domestic servant for a wealthy Nazi family, as many German girls were.
You did not get an education like high school. In America, you was put into a family, and then you was their maid. And we got paid like $2.50 a month. And this is what happened to me when I was 14 until 16. And then we lost the war. And this was on May the 8th, 1945. The Nazi lady, she was so angry for losing the war. She gave me a beating, and she locked me in. And I said, Father our, Hail Mary, looked downstairs where I could land, and I jumped from the second-story window to my freedom. I was observed by some soldiers. They had a rifle, a bayonet on top of the rifle, and a pistol, and said, little girl, do not be afraid. And he said, you are under U.S. military protection. No harm shall come over you.
After the war, a couple years later, while working at a restaurant in Germany, Wally met her future husband, an American soldier named John Czech. Married on December 18, 1947, they were together for 64 years before her Johnny passed away in 2012.
Marrying Johnny, there is no words for it. This was very, very special.
Together, they had left to America, arriving in Staten Island, to a new life, and for Wally, a new citizenship.
We were sworn in November the 12th, 1951, and then we had to make an examination about 6 months later in Waco, Texas. And our judge told us, now that you are American citizen, it's your duty to defend this country. And when the time comes, and there will be a time when America is in danger from outside and from inside, and never be afraid to stand up and be counted. And boy, he said the wrong thing to me, because I kept up with it since 1951.
Wally and Johnny were stationed at Fort Bliss, and there she decided to start writing about her experiences in Nazi Germany. She went on to self-publish her first book of her Auf-Wiedersehen series in El Paso, Texas, in 1964. While still learning how to read and write in English, Wally was determined that nothing would stop her from publishing her second book in 1970.
And the last year is because, I never told Johnny I'd done all my writing when he was in bed or sleep and things like this. And then I figured I'm gonna surprise him. And I did surprise him because I want to have it published in El Paso, and I want to the American printing company. And then I told Johnny, you own $2,500 to the printing company and $600 for the binding. And he says, we don't have this kind of money. I says, well, you in Fort Bliss, a soldier, your credit should be good, so let's make credit.
Wally didn't publish her third and fourth book until 51 years later in 2021, which are about her time as a local restaurant owner and her work in local politics. Wally has never stopped writing since. Whether it was letters to presidents, politicians, and memory of soldiers who have given their lives in American wars, or in memory of her Johnny.
I have been writing 71 years on and off. And here is the fingers to prove it. I'm proud of it, and it's a labor of love. I could never have children, but your children will benefit from it. And I did it all in honor of God, America, and my Johnny.
Every word, every sentence, every letter is from her love of being an American citizen. She has continued to be civically engaged in her community for years, attending a total of 361 city council meetings in El Paso.
Speak out when you see it wrong, and one person can make a difference. And this is why I try to be the way I am, speak out, and make people aware, because those people here, they don't know what freedom is, because they had it all their life. They were born free. When your freedom is taken away, you cannot get it right away back.
Right now, her 5th and final book is in the works, and the message is still the same. America saved her, and she owes everything to what the American flag stands for.
I can do in America everything I can do within in the law, because you are an American. You can claim the highest mountain of success and be appreciated. What it means to be American, everything.
That's our time for now. Join us this week on KRWG Radio. Every weekday, it's Morning Edition from 5 a.m. to 9, Fresh Air at 11, followed by Here and Now from noon to 2, and All Things Considered 4 to 7 p.m. KRWG News is always online at krwg.org, and we'd like to hear from you. Email us with story ideas and video submissions. The address is feedback@nmsu.edu. For all of us at KRWG News, I'm KC Counts. Have a great week. We'll see you next time on Newsmakers.